Good morning and thank you for joining us on Africa This Morning. My name is Beryl Ooro. It is the 14th of March 2014. Let's start the bulletin with a look at the leading stories.
Missing Malaysia Airlines plane. Chinese premier pledges to continue search efforts for the missing flights. President Obama on Ukraine. US President pledges to stand with Ukraine in its dispute with Russia.
The search for missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 nears the one-week mark with no trace of the plane or its 239 passengers and crew. Malaysia's transport minister has in the meantime said the Chinese satellite images that were said to show debris from the missing Malaysian airliner were released by mistake.
Nearly a full week's gone by since the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, and a massive international search has failed to find a single trace. 12 nations are now involved in the hunt for the missing plane and its 239 passengers and crew. It's one of the world's most baffling aviation mysteries. It's also casting a harsh spotlight on Malaysia's government and its handling of the incident. During the search, there's been a litany of confusing messages and a perceived lack of transparency. The problems have included conflicting information about the last time of contact with the missing jet. Asia-Pacific Senior Vice President of Sales for Boeing, makers of the missing aircraft, on Thursday refused to speculate but sought to allay any safety fears.
Of course, everybody is concerned about what happened to the MS airplane, but life is going on. I'm going to fly tonight back to US. I'm not going to sit in Hyderabad for the rest of the year. So it's the same thing. I think it's safe to fly.
On Thursday, India became the latest nation to join the search for flight MH370. It's sending ships, planes and helicopters to help scour what's now a 93,000 square kilometre search area.
Cabinet Secretary for Education Professor Jacob Kaimenyi says he will not resign over the laptop project saga. Members of the Parliamentary Committee on Education had yesterday threatened to censure Kaimenyi over the cancellation of the 24.6 billion shilling laptop tender.
Very much only take responsibility for that loss.
Members of the Parliamentary Education Committee Wednesday called for the resignation of Education Cabinet Secretary Professor Jacob Kaimenyi over the handling of the laptop tender. The Cabinet Secretary is, however, not ready to resign.
I can tell you with absolute certainty, I don't see any justification for resigning. That is presupposes that I'm wrong about what?
The project was to be started at the beginning of this year, but was postponed after bidders exceeded the budgetary projections. When the tender was finally awarded, members of Parliament raised concerns after it emerged in some quarters that due diligence had not been followed in the tendering process. Professor Kaimenyi, however, maintains that due process was followed.
Personally, I don't think I've failed the Jubilee government in any way.
The tendering process kicked off in October 2013 when the ministry engaged in competitive negotiations with three bidders, namely Heya Electrical Appliances Limited, Hewlett Package Europe, and Olive Telecommunications Limited. In December 2013, the government asked the bidders to provide the best and final offer before the three bidders submitted their best and final offers the same month. What followed was an evaluation in January this year, and Olive Telecommunications was confirmed as the lowest and most advantageous bidder at a total of 24.6 billion Kenya shillings. According to Kaimenyi, the government saved at least 8 billion Kenya shillings. There have been allegations that the minister is getting involved in shoddy deals, claims he has strongly denied.
So can they provide evidence to that effect? Yes, where is the evidence? If they have evidence, I'm prepared to be taken to court anytime if there is evidence, and I dare them.
Meanwhile, Kaimenyi has urged striking university lecturers to call off their strike, which entered day 2 Thursday, to go back to work.
There is an increase in the number of kidney patients in Kenya, with statistics from the Kenya Renal Association indicating that 1 out of 10 Kenyans have a form of kidney disease. This was revealed as Kenya joined the rest of the world in marking the Kidney Day celebrations on Thursday in Nairobi.
Amid the pomp and color that characterize the celebrations to mark the Kidney Day, there is concern about the increasing number of kidney patients in Kenya. According to statistics, 10,000 Kenyans die annually from kidney-related diseases. Seth Makligeo, a kidney specialist, blames the deaths on lack of medical equipment and specialist doctors and nurses.
The world over, I mean, the prevalence, the amount of kidney disease in the whole world is increasing, and even the rate at which is occurring, it is increasing. That is everywhere, including Kenya, and yet the resources are not increasing at the same time. And then you have some other healthcare needs that you need to take care of.
Keeping in mind this year's global theme, chronic kidney disease, the government conducted free health screenings as part of its campaign to mark the World Kidney Day 2014. Josephine Ooro, a nephrology nurse, urged the youth who are now increasingly becoming vulnerable to kidney failure due to lifestyle to go for early screening.
I think the mentality that we have had before is that kidney disease is a disease for the old age. And our eating habits have also changed. We are somehow lazy. I think we don't exercise enough, we don't drink water enough. We have a lot of instant. We want this instant, that. So the youth, I can say, they're being affected because of not being aware, but probably because of assumption.
Ibrahim Joroge, who was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease in 2011, urged kidney patients not to lose hope since the disease is preventable and curable.
Move on, don't give up, and it's treatable. We have professional doctors who are going to advise you accordingly.
Well, as the world marks the Kidney Day celebrations, a very important call has been put through to the government of Kenya, the need to educate Kenyans on chronic diseases. For Ooro Africa TV, I am Annette Akisa in Nairobi.
Kenya and Ethiopia will accelerate implementation of infrastructure projects to tap the economic potential. President Uhuru Kenyatta and Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn noted that infrastructure projects linking Kenya and Ethiopia were key to the realization of the ideals of the shared agenda of prosperity of the countries.
In a communique issued after bilateral talks in Addis Ababa, the two leaders noted that rapport between Kenya and Ethiopia had contributed to the progress achieved in the execution of regional's largest infrastructure project, the Lamu Port and South Sudan Ethiopia Transport Corridor, LAPSET.
It is therefore Kenya's strong desire to implement the Special Status Agreement concluded in November 2012 and to encourage our respective business communities to increase both trade and investment with each other. Apart from providing strong foundation for sustaining the special relationship between Kenya and Ethiopia, I believe that the Special Status Agreement also provides us a framework for engagement with bilateral investors, particularly in the development of strategic infrastructure and in aligning this to both our countries' development agenda.
President Kenyatta and Prime Minister Desalegn lauded the promotion of Joint Ministerial Commission, JMS, to Biennial High-Level Commission. In the spirit of regional business development and encouragement of investments in Kenya, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, through the chairman of Mombasa branch, say that incentives will be given to all those that seek to do business in Kenya.
The signing of the SSA, which is a special status agreement between the two countries, is going to open up immense opportunities. From the Kenyan side, we are prepared as an investment destination to welcome the investors. Through all the issues that I've spoken about, through tax holidays, through exemptions from VAT and duty on capital goods.
President Kenyatta and Prime Minister Desalegn also committed to work closely under IGAD's framework in support of the people of Somalia in their quest for lasting peace and stability in the Horn of Africa.
As you are aware, we have signed, together with Ethiopia and South Sudan, the agreement for a mega project to open up the transport corridor from Lamu, Addis Ababa and Juba in South Sudan. And I believe that once complete, this will go a long way to integrating us. But let me also hasten to add that Lamu is strategic both politically and economically for our region, and indeed it presents a most logical entry to both East and Central Africa.
Both leaders reaffirmed their commitment to security, common values and fundamental interests of the region. Together they set themselves to combat region's difficulties, among them drought, climate change, terrorism, piracy and human trafficking.
Protesters continue to clash with Turkish police after a wave of widespread protests that were triggered by the death of a teenager wounded in street clashes last summer.
Turkish police fired tear gas on protesters. It happened Wednesday in the Turkish capital Istanbul. Some fired at close range. Protesters were angry over the death of a teenager wounded in street clashes last summer. Earlier, tens of thousands of them marched for the funeral of Berkin Elvan. He died the day before after spending 9 months in a coma. Elvan became a rallying point for government opponents. His death has sparked skirmishes in Istanbul, Ankara, and other cities. On Wednesday, several thousand also protested in Ankara and were met with tear gas. The clashes add to the pre-election woes for Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan. He's battling a corruption scandal and is campaigning around the country for local elections. As of Wednesday, he had yet to comment on Elvan's death.
U.S. President Barack Obama has pledged to stand with Ukraine in its dispute with Russia. He warned Russian President Vladimir Putin the international community will be forced to apply costs if Russia does not remove its troops from Crimea.
President Obama put out a stern warning to Russia on Wednesday. He said the West will be forced to apply a cost to Moscow if it fails to change course with its involvement in Ukraine. Obama held talks with Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk at the White House, searching for diplomatic leverage to force Russian President Vladimir Putin to loosen his military grip on Crimea.
But we will continue to say to the Russian government that if it continues on the path that it is on, then not only us, but the international community, the European Union and others will be forced to apply a cost to Russia's violations of international law and its encroachments on Ukraine. There's another path available, and we hope that President Putin is willing to seize that path.
Yatsenyuk had this to say.
Mr. President, it's all about the freedom.
And sent another message to Putin to back down and calm down.
Mr. Putin, tear down this wall, the wall of war, intimidation, and military aggression. Let's stop. Let's calm down.
This comes as election workers assemble polling stations in Crimea, and Ukraine's military holds drills in the southern part of the country. All in preparation for the March 16th referendum vote on joining Russia, when the fate of Crimea will be determined.
UN High Commissioner for Refugees Antonio Guterres says Ukraine crisis could damage prospects for peace in Syria. Guterres says little progress is being made in efforts by the United States and Russia, now at loggerheads over Ukraine, to bring Syria's warring sides together after the collapse of talks in Geneva last month.
Ukraine's troubles are damaging international efforts to bring about peace in Syria. That's according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, who says there's a chance of huge disaster if attention is diverted from the Syrian conflict.
In a moment in which we would need the most relevant countries in the world to be able to come together, to narrow their differences, and to try to find a way to move into peace for Syria, the tension around Ukraine obviously will not help.
The crisis in Ukraine has seen tensions rise considerably between the US and its allies and Russia over Moscow's seizure of the Crimea region. Guterres says he's worried the tensions between Russia and the West could worsen divides already played out at the UN Security Council over Syria.
I think the Security Council reflects the divisions that exist today in the international community. The international community has lost a lot of its capacity to prevent crises and to timely solve them.
The Syrian conflict enters its fourth year this week with no end in sight. The UN is warning Syrians are about to replace Afghans as the world's largest refugee population, saying more than 3 million Syrians may have fled. A report by the charity Save the Children this week said tens of thousands are dying, not from bombs and bullets, but through disease and Syria's collapsing health system.
Jennifer Pogla endured the depths of helplessness as she pumped the last air her husband would breathe into his typhoon-battered body. And since the fatal episode last year, she has yet to gain control of her life.
This is the first time Jennifer has returned home since her husband was critically injured here last year. Super Typhoon Haiyan destroyed millions of coconut trees across the central Philippines, with some of the strongest winds ever recorded on land. One of those trees crushed Jennifer's husband, Richard, as he sheltered inside their hut.
We couldn't see where the coconuts were falling because it was dark. The wind was blowing from all sides. It was rainy. We couldn't see anything.
Jennifer eventually got Richard to hospital in Tacloban, but the typhoon had knocked out the power supply and staff were overwhelmed. Medics could do little for him other than amputate one leg and give Jennifer a pump to manually inflate his lungs. Like this, she kept her husband alive, but only for 7 hours.
I was praying and hoping that he would live. I was praying that even if he was disabled, that's okay. As long as he lives, that's all I want.
Richard died, leaving Jennifer to care for their baby daughter and 6-year-old son. With almost all their belongings destroyed in the typhoon, Irish and RJ have little more than this photo to remember their father. They are living with their extended family, but with their farms destroyed, they rely completely on aid.
I just wish I can find a job for the sake of my children, for the future of my children. That's all I wish for in life.
For the time being, though, work is impossible as Jennifer struggles to care for her children while trying to come to terms with life without her husband.
5 years after it collapsed under the Taliban rule, the once thriving silk industry in the Swat Valley of northwest Pakistan is still in shreds, leaving thousands without work and entrepreneurs counting the cost.
A shadow of its former self. Just 7 years ago, Pakistan's Swat Valley was famous for the quality of its silk industry. Shaukat Ali even moved from Lahore to take advantage of the boom time. From earning around $800 a month repairing machines, now he struggles to break even.
My
daughter isn't married. She's 18. She is sitting at home, and if the industry does not recover, then she will never leave. As we don't have a dowry, and without that, no one will want to marry her.
Many blame the Taliban for the collapse of the silk industry. In 2007, the hardliners moved into the Swat Valley, implementing their version of Sharia law. Up to 20,000 silk workers lost their jobs. The Pakistani army may have driven out the radicals, but some complain reinvestment in local businesses hasn't followed.
Factories were destroyed during the Taliban era. There wasn't just a silk industry here, but cosmetics too. Many people had employment. But after the Taliban arrived, people moved from here. Factories were shut down.
Another who has fallen on hard times is this father of 6, Rayman ul Haq. Before the Taliban takeover, he had his own business, supplying spare parts to factories. Today, he drives a taxi.
My business was running smoothly. I had invested around $30,000. 8 to 10 boys were working for me. The silk industry was a good business here. There were about 500 to 600 factories running, and I was earning $30 a day. But after that, my business collapsed.
Of those 500 factories, fewer than 20 remain. The government says it's working to rebuild the industry, but it will need to move fast to fend off Chinese competition and restore the silk of Swat to its former glory.
And with that, we come to the end of the Bulletin on Africa this morning. Join us next as we take a look at the leading stories on the social media platform with Cherotich Kaneng.